Hello everyone, welcome to Earth Archives. If we were to ask who has been discredited for the longest time in Christian history, there would be no other candidate but Mary Magdalene. After all, she was once mistaken by the Pope as a prostitute, and she might be more important than the other disciples. Let's talk about the story of who this Mary Magdalene is. Please subscribe to the show before it starts, and share it with your friends if possible. Mary Magdalene stands as one of the most significant yet enigmatic figures in the story of Jesus Christ. Her name echoes through the pages of the Gospels, painted not only in the hues of devotion but also in the vivid colors of transformation and profound loyalty. She was not a mere follower, she was a witness to the most pivotal events in Christian history, the crucifixion, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. As the first to behold the risen Christ, she carries a unique and sacred place in the Gospel narrative, her story marked by both anguish and redemption. Before the miracles of healing and faith, Mary Magdalene's life had been overshadowed by torment. She was a woman possessed, according to the Gospels, by 7 demons, tormented by forces far beyond her control. But her life was transformed when she encountered Jesus. Through his touch, his words, and his presence, Mary was healed, and the darkness that had once ruled her was dispelled. Her healing was not just physical but spiritual, the 7 demons symbolizing a deep inner chaos that Jesus, with his boundless compassion, cast out. From that moment on, Mary's devotion to him knew no bounds. She became one of his most loyal disciples, following him with unwavering faith and dedication. Her gratitude for her healing overflowed in her service, and she became a key part of the circle of women who supported Jesus' ministry, even when many of the male disciples faltered. Mary Magdalene, a figure whose name resonates throughout the Gospels, was far more than a simple follower of Jesus. Her life was marked by profound suffering, miraculous healing, and deep devotion, making her one of the most significant and enduring characters in the story of Jesus Christ. Though her name is mentioned 12 times across the New Testament, often in close proximity to key moments in Jesus' ministry, her story is one that speaks of redemption, faith, and the transformative power of divine love. Born in the fishing town of Magdala on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, Mary was a Jewish woman whose life, by all accounts, was shaped by personal torment long before she encountered Jesus. The Gospels tell us that Mary had been afflicted by 7 demons, a condition that left her spiritually, mentally, and emotionally broken. The number 7 in biblical tradition is often used to signify completeness, and in her case, it suggested the totality of her suffering. The demons that plagued Mary were not mere afflictions, they represented the full weight of evil's oppression. Imagine the psychological and physical toll such torment would have inflicted upon her, especially in a time and culture where mental illness and physical suffering were often attributed to demonic possession. Mary would have been seen as an outcast, shunned by society, her suffering misunderstood by those around her. The stigma attached to her affliction would have been immense, and her pain, both physical and emotional, would have been unrelenting. Morris Casey, in his book Jesus of Nazareth, suggests that Mary likely endured severe emotional or psychological trauma, which led to her need for exorcism. The demons she was possessed by did not simply cause her physical torment, they ravaged her mind and soul, leaving her in a state of complete despair. It's easy to imagine how society would have treated her during those days. Wealth and beauty offered no protection from the forces that assailed her. Her life was marked by the stigma of her condition, leaving her without dignity, and it seemed there was no escape from her suffering. Yet, in the midst of this deep anguish, a remarkable encounter took place. When Jesus saw Mary in her state of desperation, he saw something that no one else could, the woman she truly was, beyond the torment and the suffering. The Gospels do not provide many details about this moment, but the power of Jesus' presence is undeniable. With a simple command, he cast out the 7 demons that had bound her, freeing Mary from a life of darkness. It was a moment of divine intervention, where the power of God's love and mercy triumphed over the forces of evil. For Mary, this was not just a physical healing, it was a spiritual and emotional rebirth. The chains that had held her captive were broken, and she was given a new life. From that moment forward, Mary's life became a reflection of the gratitude and devotion she felt for the one who had set her free. The Gospels show that Mary became one of Jesus's most faithful followers, not merely as a passive admirer, but as an active participant in his ministry. She traveled with Jesus and the 12 apostles, supporting them with her resources and services. She witnessed the miracles he performed, the parables he taught, and the love he extended to those society had cast aside. But it was not only the physical healing that shaped Mary, it was the deep, transformative love that she experienced from Jesus. It was this love, this profound grace, that redefined her life and gave her a purpose she had never known. The image of Mary Magdalene pouring perfume on Jesus's feet is a poignant and deeply emotional moment often associated with her in Christian tradition. However, when we look closely at the Gospel accounts, we find that this act of devotion is actually described in two distinct stories involving different women, leading to some confusion over whether it was Mary Magdalene or another Mary who performed this act. The incident in question is most famously recorded in the Gospel of Luke, 7:37-38. In this account, a woman described as a sinner enters a Pharisee's house where Jesus is dining. She comes with an alabaster jar of perfume, weeping as she stands behind Jesus, using her tears to wash his feet. She then wipes them with her hair, kisses his feet, and pours the perfume on them in an overwhelming display of repentance and love. This woman is not explicitly identified as Mary Magdalene, but her actions have often been linked with her in Christian tradition, largely due to the association of Mary Magdalene with the theme of repentance. However, the Gospel writers are careful to differentiate between Mary Magdalene and the unnamed woman in this story. Luke chapter 7 does not identify the woman by name, and while she is called a sinner, there is no indication in the text that she was a prostitute, as later traditions sometimes suggest. Some scholars believe that the woman in this passage is simply a woman who lived in a way that society considered sinful, perhaps due to her social status, lifestyle, or reputation, but the text does not provide specific details about her past. Moreover, the Gospel of John records a similar but distinct incident, where Mary of Bethany, the sister of Lazarus, anoints Jesus's feet with expensive perfume, John chapter 12 verse 3. In this version, Mary is specifically identified, and the act takes place in the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus in Bethany. The perfume is poured out in an extravagant gesture of love and worship, and again, it is Jesus who speaks the famous words to Judas, "You will always have the poor, but you will not always have me," John chapter 12 verse 8. This act is typically connected with Mary of Bethany, not Mary Magdalene. The confusion between the two Marys, Mary Magdalene and Mary of Bethany, has persisted throughout history, and some have mistakenly merged the two figures into one, resulting in the image of a sinful Mary Magdalene who is often portrayed as a woman with a morally questionable past. However, there is no direct biblical evidence to support the idea that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute or that she had a history of immorality. In fact, the Gospels do not suggest that Mary Magdalene was involved in any form of prostitution or sinful lifestyle before her encounter with Jesus. The claim that she was a sinner comes not from the biblical text but from later interpretations and traditions that sought to tie together various stories about women who repented and followed Jesus. Mary Magdalene's story, as told in the Gospels, is one of remarkable transformation. She is identified as a woman from whom Jesus cast out 7 demons, Luke chapter 8 verse 2, a powerful act of healing that profoundly changed her life. She became a devoted follower of Jesus, often seen in the company of the disciples and playing a key role in his ministry. Her story stands as a symbol of redemption, not as one of sinful indulgence, but rather as an example of the healing power of Jesus and the depth of gratitude and devotion that can follow such transformation. The Gospel of Luke gives us a glimpse into Mary Magdalene's involvement with Jesus's ministry. In Luke chapter 8 verse 1-3, we read that Jesus traveled from town to town, proclaiming the kingdom of God, and that he was accompanied by the 12 disciples, as well as a group of women, including Mary Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out. Alongside her were Joanna, the wife of Chuza, the manager of Herod's household, Susanna, and several other women. These women not only traveled with Jesus and the disciples but also helped to support them out of their own means. This passage is crucial in understanding Mary Magdalene's role, as it highlights her contribution to the ministry, both as a follower and as a financial patron. The mention of Mary Magdalene's support of Jesus's ministry out of her own means suggests that she may have had financial resources at her disposal. The town of Magdala, from which she took her name, was located on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, and it was known for its thriving fishing industry. As a woman from this town, it is likely that Mary had access to some wealth, possibly due to her family's business or her own personal circumstances. The Bible dictionary All the Women of the Bible explains that Magdala means tower or castle, which might hint at a position of higher social or economic standing. It is possible, therefore, that Mary Magdalene's financial support was not only a result of her generosity but also of her personal means. The wealth and resources Mary Magdalene had were significant in the context of Jesus's itinerant ministry. While Jesus and his disciples often traveled with little more than their faith and the generosity of others, Mary Magdalene and the other women played a key role in sustaining the group. These women were not mere onlookers, they were active participants, using what they had to further the mission of Jesus. The text in Luke underscores that, while women in Jewish society of that time were typically excluded from formal religious roles, these women were not only present at the core of Jesus's ministry but were instrumental in supporting his work. It is important to recognize the cultural context in which Mary Magdalene lived. In first-century Jewish society, women generally had fewer rights and social privileges than men, and they were typically relegated to roles in the private sphere, focused on domestic responsibilities. Public leadership, teaching, and even participation in religious activities were predominantly the domain of men. Yet, Jesus consistently broke these social norms, interacting with and empowering women in ways that were revolutionary for his time. The women who followed him, including Mary Magdalene, were not just passive beneficiaries of his teachings, they were active contributors to the ministry. This radical inclusivity of women in Jesus's circle is one of the defining features of his earthly ministry and speaks volumes about the nature of the kingdom of God that he proclaimed, one where the marginalized, the outcast, and the overlooked were welcomed and valued. Mary Magdalene's presence at Jesus's crucifixion, burial, and resurrection is pivotal in the Gospels, and her deep commitment to following him is evident throughout these events. One of the most profound aspects of her story is her intimate knowledge of the exact location where Jesus was buried, a detail that would become crucial when she, along with the other women, discovered the empty tomb. The accounts of her journey to the tomb reveal not only her unwavering devotion to Jesus, but also her courage and determination in the face of heartbreak and uncertainty. When Jesus was crucified, most of his disciples, fearing for their own safety, fled the scene. But among the few who remained steadfast, we find a group of women, including Mary Magdalene. The Gospel of Mark, 1540, records that Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome were watching from a distance, witnessing the tragedy of Jesus's crucifixion. Similarly, in the Gospel of Matthew, 27-55-56, Mary Magdalene is again named among the women who stayed, while the Gospel of John, 19:25, notes that she stood near the cross along with Jesus's mother and other women. Their presence at such a moment of intense suffering and danger shows not only their deep love for Jesus but also their courage. As scholar E. P. Sanders suggests, The women may have felt less at risk of arrest than the male disciples, or perhaps they were simply braver, choosing to stay with Jesus even in his final moments. Whatever the reason, their loyalty stood in stark contrast to the desertion by most of the men. After Jesus' death, Mary Magdalene's commitment did not waver. According to Mark chapter 15 verse 47, she, along with Mary, the mother of Joseph, observed where Jesus' body was laid. They remained after his crucifixion to witness his burial by Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy and respected member of the Sanhedrin who had secretly become a follower of Jesus. The location of Jesus' tomb was vital to the events that would unfold. The Gospel of Matthew, 27-61, notes that Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting there opposite the tomb, indicating that they observed the tomb closely, knowing exactly where he had been laid to rest. This observation would prove crucial when, 3 days later, they returned to the tomb to mourn and care for Jesus' body. Their deep connection to the place where he was buried is emphasized by the Gospel of Luke, 23:55, which states, "The women who had come with Jesus from Galilee followed Joseph and saw the tomb and how his body was laid in it." Mary Magdalene and the other women not only witnessed Jesus' death and burial, but also committed the path to the tomb to memory. The NIV Cultural Background Study Bible suggests that Mary's journey to the tomb, especially in the dark, was a sign of her serious commitment. It was no small task to make this journey, particularly since she was not from Jerusalem, yet Mary's determination to be close to Jesus even after his death speaks to the depth of her love and loyalty. On the morning of the third day, when Mary Magdalene and the other women made their way to the tomb, it was still dark, and their hearts were heavy with grief. What they found, however, would change the course of history. The stone that had sealed the tomb had been rolled away, and the body of Jesus was gone. In the Gospel of John, 20:13, after Mary Magdalene had peered into the tomb and saw that it was empty, she was approached by angels who asked her why she was crying. Her response is deeply telling. "They have taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they have put him." Mary's words reflect her overwhelming grief and confusion. Her Lord, the one she had followed and served, was gone, and the tomb, which she had so meticulously observed just days earlier, now held only emptiness. The Gospels highlight Mary's crucial role in spreading the message of Christ's resurrection. In the Gospel of Luke, 24:10, it is Mary Magdalene, along with a group of other women, who first told the apostles about the events they had witnessed at the tomb. This detail is significant, especially considering the social context of the time. Women were not regarded as credible witnesses in the patriarchal society of first-century Judea. Yet, the Gospel accounts place Mary Magdalene and other women at the center of the story, underscoring their essential role in proclaiming the resurrection. Why would the early church risk undermining its own credibility by relying on women's testimony, especially when it wasn't taken seriously? The answer lies in the truth of the gospel itself. The women were the first to see Jesus, and their voices were the first to declare the most important event in human history. It is a testament to the truth of the gospel that Mary Magdalene's testimony is given such prominence. In this moment, Mary Magdalene was not just the first witness of the resurrection, she was also the first evangelist, entrusted with the most important message the world had ever received. The resurrection of Jesus was not simply an event to be witnessed, it was an event to be proclaimed, and Mary was the one chosen to carry that proclamation to the disciples. Her actions, her faithful witness to Jesus' death, her grief at the tomb, and her joy at recognizing the risen Christ, became the very foundation of the Christian message that would spread throughout the world.